Just get this one quick setup. All right, and we are all set up for the night. Hello, everybody who might be dropping in. Welcome to the technically third, but first official stream of Night Rides. If you hadn't caught the test streams, what this basically is we are vibing to music. It's like, I swear to you, I will actually do better at speaking on a stream going forward. But basically, think of it as a virtual writing hangout. We're vibing to music. I'm editing, so therefore you will hear me read my work in progress aloud. We're shooting the shit with each other. We're just having a good old fashioned time with our own works in progress. If you're unfamiliar with me, I highly doubt that's the case because you're probably following me on social media. But hello, I'm Jax Wolff. I'm a fantasy writer, and my work in progress is called The Nameless Song. It is a friends to lovers fantasy romance that is, in short, dude turns into a dragon and shenanigans ensue. Tonight we do have an icebreaker, slightly different. We have icebreakers every night the streams. Tonight's icebreaker, which you can respond to in chat amongst yourselves or just aim a response at me. I will read some of these responses out loud, respond to them, whatever. Tonight's icebreaker is coffee or tea for a late night ride. So basically, when you go down, sit down to do your writing thing, do you prefer coffee or tea? Icebreakers, of course, might be tailored to your works in progress in the future. But for right now, yes, I am basically tempting fate, as it were, I want to say, by asking this. But coffee or tea, right in the chat, argue with each other. Don't argue with each other. Be civil to each other and have a sprightly conversation. We're all chill people here, just chill with each other, and so on and so forth. So, with with all the preliminaries aside, only thing left is chat is open to all of you, not just for icebreakers, but for anything you feel like saying. Like if you want to talk about your works in progress, if you want to talk to each other, if you want to talk to me, throw in your questions. Hey, Gassian, what's up? Coffee, hell yeah. Normally, I would be a coffee person myself, but tonight it's Earl Grey tea. It's a little bit late for coffee for me, unfortunately. But other than that, excellent taste. Like, hell yeah to coffee. But, yeah, for anybody else who is just joining in, welcome. Welcome to Night Rights. Welcome to, it would have to be coffee for me as well, though I have been enjoying tea as well. First off, hi Neil. I assume it's Neil tonight. But also understandable. Coffee is just, there's something about it, but now and then you just gotta have tea. Are you enjoying tea right now? And if so, what tea are you enjoying? Um, to everybody else, feel free to slip anything into the chat within reason. Be civil. Don't be weird. That kind of thing. I will read it, respond to it as it comes in. Or, if you want to have a conversation with each other, you are free to do that as well. Other than that, it's basically vibes, music, chill, writing, and so on and so forth. Uh, so tonight, I do admit that I had actually edited the first scene of chapter 8, which you saw me write during the last night rights. That's completely cleared, so unfortunately I can't show you what it looks like now. Probably for the best because marketing reasons, I'm clearing this eventually, whatnot. It is Neil, though you can always call us Natsume. Also good to know. And I have Yogi's brand stress relief tea most recently. Ooh. I have heard good things about that tea. It I hope that is very delicious tea and that is very stress reliefy, as in it's doing its job, because that does sound like a really good time right there. So, one last thing before I jump into things, but what's everybody working on also? Like, shout out what we're chilling out with in the chat. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to jump right into it. As I was saying, hey Cryptic, welcome to the chaos, by which I mean the chill writing. I'm probably just gonna be chilling to be honest. That is totally a-okay. Writers tend to be a more introverted bunch. I understand that. So if you're just here to jive and chill, that is a-okay. Feel free to enjoy the dulcet tones of, this is actually Neil.Fun's ambient chaos, by the way. It's a mix of lo-fi and rain, in case you're wondering why it keeps on looping and whatnot. If it does get annoying, I will switch to an actual playlist, or go back to YouTube for lo-fi beats. But I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, I think I will work on prompts for now. We have been having a hard time focusing, so we are just trying to write, I think. Totally understandable. I hope that having this little dedicated time to listen to music in my soothing voice reading chapter will help you write. I'm working on a self-indulgent little fanfic with my OC in it. LOL, just trying to enjoy myself right now for real. Honestly, valid. You shouldn't just like do that self-indulgent stuff. Like, that is what fanfic is for. That is what writing in general is for. Some people take it way too seriously, but it's sort of like the entire point of writing is just putting yourself on the page and whatnot. So my writing space is still a bit of a mess, to be honest. Also mood. But mess how? Hopefully, like, just organizational mess and not like emotional or anything like that. Moving is a unique form of torture. That it is. I hope box unpacking is will you'll get through that soon because that is a pain in the ass and I do not wish that upon my worst enemies. But best of luck with the rest of the settling in process. Um, may it be fairly smooth. That said, hmm, all my notebooks are still in boxes. I have nowhere to put my pens, and a pop-up on my computer keeps interrupting me typing this message. That is super weird to the pop-up, and I am so sorry. Uh, hopefully it's not a YouTube thing. Hopefully, it'll leave you alone. Hopefully it's not like McAfee being like, what the fuck are you downloading right now? In other words, I hope that computer issue resolves. As for notebooks and pens, also mood. God, I remember having to dig all that stuff out of my own boxes not too long ago. So like, I understand the absolute pain. It's like you have to find the box first off. But like I said, I hope that getting settled in will be a relatively smooth process. It's a game I'm trying to open. The Ubisoft launcher is a functional program. No, it's not. Don't lie to yourself. Ubisoft is never a functional program. Ubisoft in general is not functional. Oh god. Anyway, uh on to chapter 8 scene 2. Like I said, chapter 8 scene 1 has already been completed and fully edited. So I unfortunately can't actually read that to you guys. Which is probably for the best because something something querying don't reveal more than 10% something something. So fortunately I know where all the boxes are because I moved those in our car. Yeah, I got it. Not letting anyone else touch my writing. Understandable. Totally understandable, Cryptic. But yeah, that is that also I understand like the entire pain of having to dig things out of boxes. All right. So, I'm wishing all of you the best of luck with your writing and your projects, and you're telling Ubisoft to stop bothering you. And without further ado, let's smash through chapter 8, scene 2, maybe first scene of chapter 9, scene 1, because this scene and the next one are supposed to be very short. And let's do it. It took a bit for Mick to land. Eleanor knew that it was because finding a space in trees large enough for a dragon to ease through was complicated, but she really wanted to believe that Mick was actually enjoying himself up there. When she teasingly suggested this, he flashed her as exasperated a look as he could muster on a dragon's face. Flashed her as he flashed her as an exasperated. He flashed her the most exasperated look he could muster on a dragon's face. There we go. Okay, maybe not, Eleanor said as she planted her feet on the ground beside him. Though you have to admit, the kingdom is quite beautiful from above. Mick's exasperated look gave way to an awkward one, as if he was caught without anything to say in response. He cleared his throat and bucked his head away from Eleanor, now pointed east. We need a plan, he said slowly. We can't just walk into the Fey Kingdoms and demand answers. We can't, Eleanor agreed, but maybe we can. But maybe we don't have to just yet. We should go to the Royal Archives. The Royal. Mick snapped his head back in her direction. Mick snapped his head back in her direction. Seriously? Yes? Eleanor dug into her bag and drew the codex into the open. I was trying to tell you that the temple is from the... Mick shouldered backwards, templing... to me. Name. Hi friends, it's Companion Wolf. I'm trying to decide what to do now, but I finally found my headphones. Welcome, Companion Wolf. And Oakleaf, hello. Happy to see you both. Uh, welcome to Night Rights. Incidentally, if you're interested, there is a question of the night, and it is coffee or tea. And you are free to discuss this amongst yourselves. I will read answers and whatnot. Just don't get into fistfights. I'm kidding. But feel free to talk about your stuff, what you're working on in chat. I am currently on chapter 8, scene 2, and we've just gotten into it. So I will keep on chugging, but I will definitely check out chat and read your responses as they come in. So cheers. Cheers and welcome, and I hope the vibes have reached you well tonight. Neither I like hot chocolate. If I have to pick, I think coffee. That is actually valid. Hot chocolate is difficult to argue against. And I guess not everybody is coffee or tea, so I guess that's not really fair to make people choose. Tea, personally, herbal or green. Caffeine makes me jittery. Also understandable. God, yes, to the smell of coffee. I hate to be cliche, but that's part of the reason why I like going to coffee shops. Like good ones with the where they actually grind the coffee and brew it right there. Oh my god. Just there's something energizing about that smell. Though I am also a coffee drinker, so there's that too. But herbal or green, but absolutely tea green especially is it's very calming. So excellent taste right there. Let's see. Love a good black tea, but I could sniff coffee all day. Yes. As Captain Picard says, Earl Grey, hot. Which is exactly what I'm doing right now. But yeah, personally, I appreciate both. I can take green tea, black tea, whatever you'd like. But I can totally understand why some people would be like green tea or black tea or even herbal tea because flavor. But anyway, let's see. We are right here. Okay, Nick jolted backwards, feet stumbling over themselves until they carried him right up against a tree. His ears flicked back, pressing against his head. His ears pressed again. Flattened. Love me some hot leaf juice. Absolutely. His ears flattened against his head. Where did you get that? The temple. Why did you take it? It's the only other thing there. It's the only other thing there. You said you found the amulet on that pedestal. You said you found the amulet on that pedestal. Was there? You said you found the amulet on the pedestal of it. You said you found the amulet on the pedestal in that temple. This was on the pedestal. There has to be some... Elmer froze, eyes widening. Then she chuckled, shook her head, and held the codex up in one hand. Mick, this isn't a cursed object. Come here. At first he didn't. He even pressed himself against the tree, grinding his... Ground his claws into its base, like a scared cat backing away from a tub of water. He even pressed himself against the tree and ground his claws into its base, like a scared cat backing away from a tub of water. Cocking her head at him, Eleanor stepped forward, the codex held before her. Come on, it won't hurt either of us. Look. She flicked her fingers across the glass, summoning the words onto its glowing surface. Mick stumbled away from her, body low and trembling, wings half spread over. She flicked her fingers across the glass and summoned the words onto its glowing surface. Summoned words onto its glowing surface. Mick stumbled away from her, body low and trembling, wings half spread over him. He crouched there, feet away from her, golden eyes wide and fixed on the codex. Hello, Oakley's cat. Ah, yes, the most valid chat participant, Oakley's cat. We love the presence of the kits. Yes, we do. We love the presence of the kits very much. He crouched there, feet away from her, golden eyes wide, and fixed on the codex, until he realized nothing was happening. Then, slowly but surely, he eased out of his stance a step closer. He says, oh. We say, right back. Slowly but surely, he eased out of his stance and stepped closer. Eleanor tilted the device towards him to let him see. What is this? He asked quietly. A codex, she explained. First-stage civilizations use these to store information and to entertain themselves. Store information and entertain themselves. The tube needs to be there. Information. Mick settled into his haunches before her. What sort of information? Eleanor shrugged. Everything, I suppose. Etienne is leading an ongoing project to collect codices throughout the kingdom and decipher them in order to better understand the First Age. That's why we need to go to the Royal Archives. If Etienne can decipher what this codex holds, then we'll be able to figure out how this happened, why, and potentially even how to change you back. The object around your neck is a first-stage device if it was down. It's a first-stage device, Mick. The entire place is a first-stage ruin, and that temple had to be from a first-stage god. It makes sense for a first-stage manual to... I don't think this needs to be here exactly. Too bad I can't post pics here, but he's a long and orange. He's an orange cat, the best kind of cats, no less. I love orange cats. It's just, they're so friendly. And they're so cuddly. And they're so adorable. Yes. At last his eyes rose to her face, and a flicker of the Mick she had always known returned. Eleanor, the Royal Archives. Standardizer spelling kits. The Royal Archives are in Eldovan, isn't it? My orange boy is the sweetest little baby. I love him. Marmalade beast with one brain cell at best. I love what's happening in chat right now. Like the entire love for the orange. We all understand. And I love that for us. We all just understand the beauty of orange. Marmalade is the best boy. I'm biased. And is holding the brain cell hostage. He can open doors. Oh no. He can open doors for chaos. God, you guys are making me want to go like on Pet Finder or something like that. Go look up orange cats and just limit the fact that I cannot have orange cat right now. Mentioning Marmee has summoned him. He's trying to get comfy and keeps. We adore the orange kits. They can do no wrong and all the wrong. I am screenshotting that comment if you don't mind because that is very accurate and also extremely funny. You just threw my controller on the floor. I love how other chats, actual, I don't know, like reactions to the video, this chat, ongoing commentary of all the chaos oranges ensue on our lives. Get an orange cat, they said. They're dumb and cuddly, they said. Meanwhile, mine opens doors installed specifically to thwart him and doesn't snuggle it, and I love him very much. Oh goodness. I I love I love that for your cat. Oh goodness. Huh. I am not going to go look at orange cats to adopt right now. I am not going to look at cats to adopt right now. I'm not going to look at cats to adopt right now. Anyway, at last his eyes rose to her face and a flicker of the mix she had always known returned. Eleanor, the Royal Archives are in Eldovan, aren't they? Yes. How? Mer- I love Murray because he does the dumbest BS, but if you tell him something is upsetting you, he will stop doing it immediately. That is a smart cat, but also I am a little bit concerned because that also implies that he knows something will upset you or understands. Or maybe he doesn't, and he only learns after he sees you upset. I don't know how cat brains work exactly. So sorry. No, don't be sorry that you derailed the writing chat. The cat chat is cat chat is very welcome. He's incredibly emotionally intelligent and then constantly falls off the couch. Ah, cats. They're fun and very intelligent beings. Oh my goodness. Oop, IKEA furniture right there. How do you propose getting a dragon into the kingdom's capital? For a second time, Eleanor froze, that green lantern on her face. Oh, she knew this question was coming. She was just hoping Mick wouldn't think of it. But now that it sat out in the open, she swallowed hard and slid the codex into her bag. I'm working on that, she admitted, but I know I can figure it out and we'll have enough time for me to do it. Or alternatively, we'll go to the Fey Kingdoms and ask them why they let us down there, Mick said. They probably know how to read that thing too. They're the ones who knew about the ruins, and judging by the fact that they didn't attack me on sight, I feel like my chances of being the first and last dragon killed in Adana in hundreds of years would be much lower if I walked into their capital. Cat chat is exactly what I expect from writers. Exactly, that's why cat chat is very welcome here. He used up all his stats on emotional intelligence, 20 charisma, 3 intelligence. That sounds about right for a D&D character and also cats. Eleanor nodded slowly. Once again, she had to admit Mick had some solid logic going. Uh, Mick, what's Mick? I can read. I am literate. Once again, she had to admit Mick had some solid logic going there, except if they led you down there, then that means they want you to be a dragon, she said. Would they really help you? The silence that followed was thick and told Eleanor a lot more than the look on his face. Not sure I'm liking that valid point you threw out there, Mick said. Eleanor stood on toes to pat him on the shoulder. Why don't we just set up camp? Maybe coming up with a plan will be easier after we get a bit of rest and some food. Now? Mick replied. His eyes darted around the forest. She knew why he was asking. If the roles were reversed, wouldn't she be eager to return to her true form? Her shoulders sank out of pity, yet... I don't... Except there was one tiny flaw in this train of thought. There we go. If they led you down there, then that means they want you to be a dragon. How helpful do you think they would actually... Oh, are we getting a link to Kitty Pig? I am keeping an eye on chat. How helpful would they actually be? Hey, if you start chewing on cords, I will evict you. No, you won't. You know that. No, you won't, and you know that. Army immediately leaves. Silence that followed was thick and told Eleanor a lot more than the look on his face. Not sure I'm liking that valid point you threw out there, Mick said. Eleanor stood on her toes to pat him on the shoulder. Why don't we just set up camp? Maybe coming up with a plan will be easier after we get a bit of rest and some food. Now? Mick replied. His eyes darted around the forest. She knew why he was asking. If their roles were reversed, wouldn't she be eager to return to her true form? Her shoulders sank out of pity. I know this isn't going to be easy to hear, Eleanor said, but I'm afraid you'll need to spend the night like this. I promise... I promise you, Mick. We'll figure something out starting tomorrow. I promise you, Mick, we'll figure something out starting tomorrow. It's starting tomorrow morning, alright? I know this isn't going to be easy to hear, but I'm afraid you'll need to spend the night like this. But I promise you, Mick, we'll figure something out starting tomorrow morning. Just one night. Don't need that either. Her hand ran along the scales until it reached his foreleg, and there she squeezed right above his elbow. Who knows, maybe all of this is temporary, and you'll be back to your old self in the morning. For a second, Mick tensed, his jaws clicking together, almost as if he wanted to say something. But then his golden eyes slid away from her, into the darkness of the forest, and for another moment he sat as if deep in thought. Eleanor squeezed his arm again and opened her mouth to say something, but he relaxed beneath her touch. You know, that valid point's something I can get along with, he said. But, yes? He took a shuddering breath, but even with what was clearly an attempt at covering it up, Eleanor could still hear the soft grumbling of his stomach. What do dragons eat exactly? He asked. Eleanor patted his shoulder and gave him a confident grin. Good. He was relaxing. The more relaxed he was, the easier it was for her to think. Oh, a panicked Mick wasn't anything new to her. He was even adorable when he was frazzled. But serious long-term panic, that thrum of constant, intense anxiety that pounded at her walls, especially now that he needed her to figure this out, that wasn't something she wanted to deal with. But that wasn't important right then. What was the answer to his question was important right then. Meat. She turned away from him, facing the forest. and she turned away from him and faced the forest across. She turned away from him and faced the forest across the clearing. A lot of fresh meat. Channeling heart magic always felt more awkward to her than channeling lightning, but so it took a moment for her to reach out into the darkness. She worked her hands in front of her, weaving her heart magic into an invisible wave that flowed out of her luminous well and into the unknown. She worked her hands in front of her, weaving her heart magic into. She wove her heart magic into an. She wove her heart magic into an invisible wave that flowed out of her luminous well and into the unknown. She wove her heart magic into an invisible wave that flowed out of her luminous well and to the unknown before her. She felt every presence that wave brushed. There we go. She wove her heart magic into an invisible wave that flowed out of her luminous well and through the unknown before her. She felt every presence that wave brushed, mice, birds, even the trees and mushrooms along the way, yet she passed each one. Yet she passed each entity one by one, too small, not meat, not enough for a dragon. Eleanor? Mick said. He was on his feet now. She kept her eyes on the forest ahead, but she could feel him beside her. What are you doing? There, big, tough herbivore. But would it be enough for a dragon? Only one way to find out. Calling, Eleanor replied. You'll want to get ready. Calling? What? Mick curled his form around her and peered down at her face. Eleanor, look at me. What are you calling? And pull. Eleanor tugged at the wave, coaxed the creature into turning, and as soon as she released, she felt a charge. And coaxed the creature into turning, and as soon as she released, she felt a charge through her field. She felt a charge through her field. Perfect. With a flick of her wrist, she dropped her heart magic and dug herself into. Perfect. With a flick of her wrist, she dropped her heart magic and dug into herself for the right lightning spell. Stunning would do nicely. Somewhere through the trees, the bellow came, amidst the cracking of branches and the thunder of hooves, and then it burst forth from the underbrush and the thickets, the silver moonlight glistening off its moss-covered pelt. Mick's hot breath rushed across Eleanor's neck as his lips grabbed the back of her waistcoat. Before she could protest, he jerked his head and tossed her out of the way. The bull moss steer slammed it. Pulling out a thesaurus. Bull moss deer smashed its curling wooden antlers into its downturned wing. A second later, and from her vantage point, half a clearing away, Eleanor watched Mick shove the deer back. She was right. It was huge, nearly as tall as Mick was now, with a body as thick as an old oak tree. It ground its black hooves into the earth as it leaned its tank of a body against Mick's. With another bellow, it swung its head down, antlers sprouting glowing emerald thorns that promptly dug into Mick's side. Mick cried out, but then spread his wings and took off, pulling his shoulder off the free from the deer's antlers. He shot his body over the deer's back and planted its claws into its flesh, but in response, it bucked and jerked its head, swinging its antlers violently. Vines exploded out of the ground and arced over them both, in a flood of panic. Nick sprang off the deer's back, ripping gashes into its flesh as he went. He shot up higher and higher into the air in a desperate attempt at evading the vines, but they latched onto one of his feet and slammed him and threw him back into the earth. The stag stomped within its own wooden cage, braying and weaving wood magic through its glowing antlers, thicker, sharper. What vines happening here? Yeah, fuck it. Thicker, sharper vines burst from the earth and twisted into one massive spike whose point hovered above the deer's head. Eleanor was back on her feet, hands sparking with her stunning spell. Nick's name had gone to the back of her teeth, and one foot was raised in preparation to dart to his side, all to protect him from what was quickly becoming a mistake. But then, before she could move, before she could fire, something else did. Mick. He opened his jaws and his throat lit with brilliant red, and without warning, he exhaled. And without warning, he exhaled an inferno that spawned. Ouch. And he opened his jaws and his throat lit with brilliant red, and he exhaled an inferno that swallowed the deer in its strike hole, along with the ground it stood on and the brush around it. Eleanor froze all at once. Fire. The clearing was on fire. The deer was bucking and writhing in flames. The vines had burnt to cinders, and Mick rose, his wide, terrified eyes flicking from flame to flame. Then he stretched his wings skyward and reared back, and his voice pierced the fire's roar. No! And just like that, it winked out, all of it. All at once. Just quickly here. What was their note? Okay, cool. Every last flame choked itself down to embers at his feet, and even those embers withered into ash where they fell. Nick stumbled backwards on his hind legs, forelegs scrambling for the nearby trees. He stared down at the carpet of gray before him, at the stag as it stumbled weakly, hornless and in burning agony, in his direction. Eleanor shot her lightning at it. All it took was the crack of a single spark on its shoulder to force it to its front knees. Oh. Love Dragon Mick, he's so cool and has no idea. Precious Bean. Thank you. Yeah, he has no idea. In more ways than one. Soon, though, eventually. By the end of the book, he has an inkling, but not really. But we can all just give him pats out of comfort and sympathy. But yes, thank you. All it took was the crack of a single spark on his shoulder to force it to its front knees. She glanced back at her partner, who merely stood there, staring in quiet horror, and she knew he couldn't finish this thing off. I'm so sorry, she murmured. And then she pulled the knife Mick had given her for self-defense from her belt, and she slit the deer's throat. Baby protect. Yep, yep. Alright, so that is chapter 8. We're on to chapter 9. Let me just pull up the notes for that real quick. And quick review. Dip out, but it was nice hanging. Totally okay. Thank you so much for coming again. Always awesome to see you. And thank you also for Cat Chat. That was genuinely a lot of fun. Uh, have a great night. Take care. And hope to see you. The next one will be on Thursday, actually. I might do one on Tuesday, but most likely I will probably be flying face down and exhausted for reasons. So hope to see you Thursday. Other than that, yeah, definitely take care. As for this chapter, I'm just quickly seeing where our notes are here. There might be some revision going on in chapter 9, actually. And this is a little bit longer than I thought it would be. So, I mean, we'll get it started and see where we go. 10 o'clock hard deadline, though. So, chapter 9. Mick tried to reason with himself. This wasn't his body. It wouldn't be his body for long. He and Eleanor were fine, apparently. He and Eleanor were fine, completely unscathed after all that fire. And the fire itself, so he used magic. Everyone else in the world could. Why was that such a bad thing? And he could control it, or at least he thought he could. Didn't he pull that fire back before it did any real damage, or worse, hurt Eleanor? So everything was fine, right? This was fine. This line of thinking at least put his mind back together to help. Enough. This line of thinking at least put his mind back together. So he could help Eleanor clear the ash and remaining sticks. That line of thinking at least put his mind back together so he could help Eleanor clear the ground and set up camp. The deer sat beside the fire pit he had her dig. It was entirely for him, but are you all right? Her voice drew him back out of his thoughts. She had come back. Damn, this is so awkward. This line of thinking at least put his mind back together so he could help Eleanor clear the area and set up camp. The deer sat beside the fire pit he had her dig. It was entirely for him, but are you all right? Her voice drew him back out of his thoughts. She had come back. She had returned. When did she leave? With a bundle of sticks in her arms. And now she was kneeling by the pit in the process of setting up the campfire while her eyes steadied on him. Yeah, he lied. Sorry. It's been a long day. You're surprised that you can do magic, aren't you? Eleanor said. She set a flat piece of wood in front of her and pinned a knot of dried grass to its surface with the point of a stick. I was wondering if you could myself. I was wondering if you could. Dragons were in possession of vast amounts of lumina. It was thought that their magical abilities outclassed those of the Fae. Mick wasn't sure why that fact unsettled him so much, but it did. Oh, I mean, that's interesting, but I was more concerned about, setting Phelan Woods on fire again. Ah, you seem weirdly calm about nearly being roasted alive. You seem weirdly calm about nearly being roasted alive. Don't need weirdly there. You seem calm about nearly being roasted alive. You seem calm about nearly being roasted alive. Eleanor rolled the stick back and forth between her palms in an attempt to light the knot on fire. Well, I knew that if you learned how to use magic at all, you wouldn't figure out how to control it. Fireballs are basic fire spells, as is smothering magical fire, and you seem to be quite a natural at adapting to your situation right now, so I trusted you, in a word. And it seems I was quite correct in doing so. A natural. That was why the magic thing unsettled him. It was a void well. Doing magic wasn't natural for him, and that wasn't even taking into consideration that earth magic was on the exact opposite side of the elemental wheel from fire. It took earth mages decades to work up to fire, and all of a sudden he, someone who shouldn't be able to use magic in the first place, could just use it. He didn't like this. It was all happening too fast. He was getting too used to this already. First it was flight, then it was fire magic, and then he swallowed and looked at the deer, and he realized right then that he wasn't particularly hungry. And he realized that he wasn't hungry, right? And he realized that he wasn't hungry after all. Eleanor straightened. Eleanor straightened up. She had bent herself over the kindling in an attempt to blow on it and get it to spark, but evidently, judging by the thin wisp of smoke curling up from the board, she wasn't successful. Yet this didn't seem to faze her. In fact, she didn't even notice, apparently. Gods above, fire magic, she breathed. I thought transformation magic was just a myth. I mean, is it? Nick shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His mother had been a bit of an expert in blood magic, even went up to Eldervin on a scholarship to study it with the best chirurgeons in the country when she was young. And from her, Mick knew a thing or two about blood magic, mostly how blood witches typically used it to stitch flesh together and purify the body from whatever ailed it, but also the extent of blood magic gone wrong. Stories of blood mages puppeteering helpless victims or raising the dead into mindless minions. But transformation, that deserved a footnote in itself. It takes a lot, Mick said quietly. You're pulling apart the body and putting it back together. That's why it's easier for somebody to be something small. You don't need to worry about generating that much. He trailed off. He could feel the bile rising in his throat now. But a dragon? Eleanor breathed. She sat back onto her heels again, the plume of smoke she'd made cooling into nothing before her, unnoticed. The plume of smoke she made cooled into nothing, unnoticed. The plume of smoke she'd made cooled into nothing. The plume of smoke she made cooled into nothing in front of her, unnoticed. Mick shrugged. Powerful blood witches did the whole person-to-mouse thing, and even then, Mick was almost certain those stories were myths. Cautionary tales. Mick was almost certain those stories were just stories, cautionary tales for the Martins who could do magic. He'd never heard of anyone powerful enough to make a dragon out of a person, nothing short of... There was that possibility, and a pleasant one sitting just at the edge of his brain. He could almost see the face of Iona, stern yet motherly, staring down at him from in front of Southwind's biggest hospital. The goddess of blood magic herself, she could probably do it. I assure you, I am not Iona. That voice again. Mick had almost forgotten about it amidst everything else he had experienced that day, and now past sunset with a dead deer on his left and Eleanor daydreaming about magic in front of him. He really wanted to forget, just for another couple of hours. We do need to talk, the voice continued, but first you should probably eat the deer. Mick's eyes pointedly settled on Eleanor again. She's right, you need your strength. Mick's eyes stared hard at Eleanor now. Never mind a dragon, Eleanor said. The point is fire magic. I don't follow, Mick said, eager to think about anything other than the voice of the deer. It's a complete shift from one domain to another, without even mastery over your native element, Eleanor said. I mean, what I was getting at is I thought transformation just took what was already available and twisted it into something new. Mick felt his innards squirm at that description. So one would assume that you would be an earth dragon at most, Eleanor continued. The reactivation of your luminous well, that part of it, I'm not surprised about. It stands to reason that exposure to that much luminol at once would force your luminous well to adapt. But fire? A complete shift of the luminous well, that only happens when... oh no. Mick? Eleanor, how can we get that fire going? Mick said. He nudged at her side with his snout, intending on pushing her a little closer to the fire pit. But she twisted in her seat and grasped his muzzle with both hands. Are you a cleric? She asked. Mick, did you forge a contract with a god? No? Mick wrestled his snout away from her. I mean, I'm not sure why you're so nervous in saying no to her. You didn't. Your relationship to me is a little more complicated. Mick winced. Was this going to be a regular occurrence? No. I didn't force a contract, Mick said firmly. Eleanor frowned, then grasped Mick's snout. Well, you're not lying. She sat down heavily, legs crossed, chin propped on one hand, elbow on her knee. But it does make me more of a puzzle. Having your luminous well shifted by the power of a god wouldn't be such a neat explanation, but this... Slowly that grin returned, the one Eleanor had clearly caught on to mystery, or history. Onto a mystery of science, or history, or magic, or whatever subject she would undoubtedly pursue. And Mick shuddered. He didn't like any of this. The idea that there was something bouncing around in his head. God. You can think of me as a god. Not helping. The point was, he didn't like the idea of having a god bouncing around his head for reasons he was promised in good time. For reasons he was promised. Would be in good time, and the idea of possibly being beholden to said god. He didn't like the idea of having a god bouncing around his head for reasons he was promised would be revealed to him, and the idea of possibly being beholden to said god, which potentially meant that changing back would be a matter of satisfying whatever favor that god wanted. Sure, not in the same way in that case. It's a bit more complicated than that, I'm afraid. And that was all one thing. But then there was the fact that Eleanor was looking at him like he was her new science project. Is that what that grin means? What an interesting girl. Look, would you stop that? Eleanor's grin vanished. Sorry? What? Mick, no, not you. You... What did Ev say about this part? Ev Hmm. No, not you. You can't hear them when you can't hear their thoughts? She cannot hear. Hear whose thoughts? Eleanor replied. Perhaps at some point she will. It seems her heart magic isn't quite put enough to reach my frequencies. Kadra, you could say she was very careful in ensuring the conversations between gods and the chosen remain as private as possible. Nick nodded slowly. You can't hear that. He shut his eyes and shook his head. Okay. You could tell her. Alright. You can't hear that. You can't hear that. He shut his eyes and shook his head. Okay. He could tell her. Tell her about the god in his head. That seemed important. It is, and you could. Yet. Nick turned inward to the god. He glared at the backs of his eyelids, intending on focusing all his frustration on to the voice in his head. The thing was, he could tell her, but he needed answers. But he needed answers first. If Eleanor couldn't hear them, then she couldn't help him reach in and corner this god and force them to explain everything. Crude. And knowing Eleanor, she would fire off thousands of questions Mick didn't know the answers to, ones that the god didn't seem to want to answer right then. In good time, as I've said, which meant that there was no point in telling her just yet, until he got answers. Nick? Her fingers brushed her snout. His eyes fluttered open, and he felt his face burn as he stared into her eyes. Everything all right? She asked. Is there something you're not telling me? Nick shifted his attention to the fire pit. In the morning, bright and early, after they had a talk. Sorry, he said. It's getting late, Eleanor. It's getting late. If we're going to look for answers tomorrow, we'll need to get some rest. Eleanor hesitated. Eleanor hesitated. Her hand squeezed his snout, and her face told him that deluge of questions was just seconds away from breaking their dam. Not today, Eleanor. I promise I'll explain after we. I promise I'll explain after we figure things out in the morning. That should be a good enough patch. Eleanor hesitated. Her hand squeezed his snout, and her face told him that deluge of questions was just seconds away from breaking their dam. So he pulled his snout out of her grasp and nudged her. Not to down it, Eleanor. I promise I'll explain after we figure things out in the morning, he said. She exhaled, then grasped the underside of his snout. Fine, but promise you'll explain tomorrow. If you've just revealed a new development, it could be useful to figuring a way out of your predicament. Mick smirked. Is that really why you're curious? Oh, Nora made a face at him. Well, at least you're in good enough spirits to tease. She picked up the stick and set to work furiously, as if just now realizing that she had spent as if just now understanding that she'd spent the better part of an hour trying and failing to light a fire. This is the most inefficient thing I've ever done, she muttered, hunched over the slightly smoldering kindling again. She muttered as she hunched over the lightly smoldering kindling. How did you do this every night? I I didn't. We had a lighter. Eleanor stopped. The plume beneath the tip of the stick died. We have a lighter? Mick's shoulders sank as the horrific realization wormed its way into his head. We had a lighter. No. As a horrific realization wormed its way into its head. We had a lighter. Let's see, are there any other notes for this scene? Just out of curiosity. Nope. Cool. Onward. She stared at him. It's with our money, and Titania, and my clothes. Eleanor nodded once. Unfortunate. Mick cringed. A little. So you've never done it this way. I mean, once. In the courtyard behind the Bard and Bird, well supervised. And Everything was well supervised and everything was prepared for me, but Eleanor stood, took a step back, and shot lightning into the fire circle. The two of them watched quietly while the kindling was blasted clean out of the pit, with not a single ember in sight within the tangled mess. Mick shot Eleanor a questioning look. She motioned helplessly to the fire pit. If it worked once, she offered. Mick's look of bewilderment turned into one of concern. Eleanor immediately turned away, hastily gathering sticks and kindling to start all over again. You know, if I can stack these right, maybe you are not trying that again. She knelt beside the fire pits to set the sticks. A strange smile crossed her face. Mick only had to look at her for a second before a creeping sense of dread crawled into his stomach. Mick only had to look at her for a second. Only looked at her for a second. For a second before a creeping sense of dread crawled into his stomach. He knew exactly what that smell meant. No, he said flatly. I was just thinking that maybe I don't have to try again, Eleanor said. Eleanor, you were not just thinking that, and no. What? She rolled back to her feet, folded her hands behind her back, sauntered sweetly to his side. Oh, she wasn't about to make this easy. Come on, Mick. Maybe this isn't entirely bad. Look on the bright side. Bright side, he replied flatly. She leaned against him, arms crossed, one leg popped over the other. Sure, magic for one. More magic than even I have? As if to punctuate that thought, she brought her one hand up to let sparks dance between her fingers. We both know this is all temporary, but until you're... We both know this is all temporary, but until you're back to your old self, why not enjoy it a little? Mick twitched one of his ears. He wished he could explain why the thought of using magic made his ears twist, but how could he phrase it to someone who thought so highly of it? Granted, Eleanor understood being avoidable was part of who he was, or at least he hoped she understood that. Did she? Not that you could entirely blame Not that you could blame her. Not being able to use magic was part of who he was, yes, but magic was one of the foundational blocks of Eleanor's world. So she got a little carried away with the idea that her best friend could experience what she could experience. That wasn't so bad. That wasn't bad. Right? Come on, she cooed. Just this once, please? It was really hard to argue with her right then. He was exhausted. It had been a long day. She had just shot lightning into the fire. She had just shot lightning into the fire pit, and now with her leaning against him and speaking with that soft tone of voice, I want you to know I'm very much aware of the fact that you're trying to talk me into this, he said. She fluttered her eyelids. Please? He shifted to his feet, shaking her off. Just as she stood straight, he swept his head low. Only because it's been a long day as it is, he said. If I'm stuck like this tomorrow, you're laying the next campfire with sticks. Deal? She held out a hand, pinky extended. Deal. Mick stepped around the pit, putting distance between himself and Eleanor, but also not pointing the fire directly at her. He stood, rolling his shoulders, breathing as evenly as he could. Okay, I can do this, he murmured. As he exhaled, he reached inside. He expected a spark, a dim light, not a God's damned inferno. There it was, all of it, an entire sea roiling inside him, right where darkness should have been. He stared down into the colors, so many of them crashing into one another. The warmth, the force of it pressed up against him like the gravity of the sun. And it took everything he had to back away, to draw his consciousness out of that miasma and to the border of his being. Oh gods, how was he supposed to channel all of that? Easy, the god murmured. Focus. You did it once. By accident? True. A pause, a very long pause. You're supposed to say something encouraging, Mick muttered under his breath. What? Oh gods, he'd said that part aloud, hadn't he? Mick opened his eyes and forced himself to chuckle awkwardly. I, um, I, um, I'm just. Nope. There we go. I'm just. He often looked away. I might need some help. Oh. And once more, she was at his side. Nothing to be embarrassed about. I can't imagine how it must feel dealing with more than just a spark. Sometimes the fact that she could hit the nail on the head from 2 miles away was less a marvel and more of a concern to Mick. He suddenly found himself unable to look at her, as if her face was a magnet the wrong way around. Nervousness stoked that fire in his chest. Nervousness and a lot of magic he really didn't want to wield right then. Relax, Eleanor purred. We're safe now, and you're not going to lose control. Now, focus and look inward. Mick's eyes fluttered shut again. I got that part. Okay, now know your Lumina is part of you. And just in the same way, you don't need to use all of your body to play your violin. You don't need to use all of your Lumina to weave magic, understand? I know? It'll come to you. Tell me what you see. It's like the sea. He prayed this didn't pique her curiosity. Please, Eleanor, help him, then study him. Ah, that's why you're overwhelmed, she sighed. Okay, don't look at all of it. Don't look at all of it at once. Imagine you're standing at the edge of the lake. The water is lapping against your feet. It's big and deep, and all you can hear is the gentle waves going in and out. The gentle waves going in and out. Are you with me? Eleanor, how? Shh, just try. He settled back into himself, sinking into the darkness behind his eyelids. Once again, he felt the lumina within him, that force, that warmth, all those colors at once. Now, Eleanor continued, imagine reaching down and dipping your hand into the water. It felt so warm, so thick, like the molasses his mother would use to make bread. He felt the sunlight of his kitchen in his memories and smelled fresh baked bread. Like the molasses his mother would use to bake. Used for baking and to bake. She made bread. He felt the sunlight of her kitchen in his memories and smelled fresh made bread, and all of a sudden, the ocean of Lumina didn't seem to matter that much anymore. Imagine cupping that hand, Eleanor continued. Let the water pool into your palm. It shimmered as it swirled across his fingers, like the silver river on moonlit nights. He heard the laughter of Eleanor's friends, and therefore his heard the laughter of Eleanor's friends on sherry and ale-soaked midnight romps, long after the last firework over the feast of Valfnir exploded violet and white over their little town. Now the easy part. Pull that little bit of lumina to the surface. Hum if you need to. He did so, an old sailor song Eleanor liked, played on winter nights when the red rooster was thick with people. He moved his hand like he would his bow. Tell it what you want to do. Fire. Just a spark. That was all he needed. And let go. He opened his jaws to exhale, and out shot heat. A crack, a roar, and then a rush of warmth and the smell of burning wood. Mick opened his eyes, only to find the campfire fully ablaze. He turned to Eleanor with an astonished glance, and she, grinning proudly, patted him on his shoulder. And that's all, she said. You'll get the hang of it the more you practice. She turned and trotted back to her bag, discarded by the equally discarded fireboard. Discarded by the equally disposed fireboard. As he watched her drop to her knees and draw up hot and onions and knives from its depths, Mick couldn't help but think about what he'd just done. and more importantly, what she just said. He'd get the hang of it the more he practiced. Why did that sound so unsettling to him? And that is it. We are on chapter 9, scene 2 out of 3, and I'm going to pause there for the night. We made really good progress. We had cat chat. It was overall a fun experience. Thank you for joining me. How about you guys? I see that there are still people in the chat. Hopefully, how have your projects been going? Anything that you'd like to share that you've managed to do over the past hour and a half? Totally okay if no as well. Either way, as I was saying earlier to Oakleaf, the next session for sure will happen on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That is directly after Weeknight Riders, if you happen to be following that on Blue Sky. Unlike last week, or this past week, where we started a half an hour later, that was just me kind of like scrambling to get things done. I'm just going to start right there. Oop. Hey, Luna. Sorry. Not Luna Cat, I'm sorry. Hey, Luna Cat, what's up? I only showed up in the last 15 minutes or so, lol. Totally okay. I hope those 15 minutes were enjoyable nonetheless. And as for Companion Wolf, I accomplished nothing, but I did eat some M&Ms. That is an accomplishment anyway. I'm gonna count that. Whatever makes you, whatever brings you joy in the moment is an accomplishment, in my opinion. Within reason, like, obviously, if murder brings you joy, that is not an accomplishment. Please do not murder people. But, anyway, overall, thank you guys for coming in. Like I said, the next one will happen on Thursday, 8 p.m. exactly. We're diving right in after Weeknight Riders. Would there be one on Tuesday? Probably not. Mondays and Wednesdays are like great nights, so that's why why night rates are not happening on either night. And let's see, Cryptic says, may or may not have abandoned my game to write only to get 2 sentences out before my hand started hurting. Ouch. But those are 2 more sentences than you had beforehand, and I do hope that your hand gets plenty of rest after that, and I mean that in all seriousness. Please do not hurt yourself over the craft. It is a myth that writers need to suffer physically and mentally for what they do. Also, in general, I'm assuming that might be chronic pain. I can't remember if that was a thing for you, but either way, I do hope that, everything is a-okay in your neck of the woods, Cryptic. So, schedule, as I've established, Mondays and Wednesdays are always going to be no-goes for me for night rides. Tuesdays might be. It depends on basically whether or not my brain is dead. Keep an eye on Blue Sky if I decide to change my mind and have a session that night. Otherwise, I will definitely see you guys on Thursday, 8 p.m. I'm not sure. I think I'm just out of practice. In that case, as Eleanor just said, it'll come back to you, or it'll get easier as you practice. So, or fingers crossed anyway, something like that. So yeah, keep an eye on Blue Sky. Otherwise, Thursday, 8 p.m. Thank you all for coming in. It was a very productive night once again, and I am super excited to have you guys here and chilling out with me and pushing me to get through the tedium that is editing. on the positive side, we're halfway through chapter 9. I think it's chapter 14 that gets derailed and where the dreaded re-rates are supposed to start really happening. So, hopefully we'll get to that before November so that in November I can trade off on rate rates, like do a little bit of the Dragon's Falls alongside rewrites for those chapters. We'll see. Either way, super excited about hosting these into November. There will be sprints and whatnot. But that is getting way too ahead of ourselves. Point is, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy you're here. And I hope that this was a really good experience for everybody. On that note, yeah, I will see you guys this coming Thursday or Tuesday. Again, keep an eye on B Sky for updates. With that said, take care, have a good night, sleep well, dream well, and right on, party on, do all that kind of fun stuff. Night, everybody.